Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I have the pleasure of having a fabulous human being and somebody who's a past, maybe still current skill agent, Jeffrey Moffat. And today, what I wanted to do is just really dig into his journey, his lessons that he's learned as somebody who's a practitioner, who's not only been doing this for several years, but also who's been through the course. So he's going to be able to give you maybe a little bit of context about which pieces he actually found relevant, because, I think it's all so relevant, but maybe you'll be able to give us a better, more accurate description of that, Jeffrey. And the other thing is what we just mentioned before we started talking together is the fact that there's a lot of people out there who look at the current job descriptions of what it means to be somebody who designs learning for other adults, who maybe want to get into this industry, but find the requirements now that are stacked are so overwhelming that a lot of them feel that they're not even able to even apply because they don't have what it takes to contribute in the right way. So I'm going to pick on you to give us some ideas about what you think about that. But first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for doing this. By the way, everybody, this is Sunday. You took out time out of Sunday. Generous human being.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Anna. And it's such an honor to be with you in this interview. And I am delighted to share the insights I have and to really encourage folks to come into this field, because it's truly extraordinary to be able to work in this field.
Right. It's such a gratifying profession, I think. Totally. I think it finds the right people, I think, too. So first, let's dig in. Tell me, and I have this, who are your learners? What do you do every day? What do you do?
Sure. I'm currently the Learning and Development Coordinator for a financial counseling agency based here in California. And my role is pretty much segmented into two baskets. One is creating learning, the other is coordinating it from outside organizations. And we partner with a variety of different training organizations to help our counselors learn specific skills. And then we also have a rather robust internal training program as well. So my learners are primarily those who conduct financial and housing counseling, but I pretty much consider anyone who works at our organization as a learner. But primarily, I do work with those who are on the front line, so to speak.
Cool. So are your learners, are you doing in-house stuff, or are you doing remote? How are you engaging with them?
Oh, when I first started, it was primarily all in-house. Pretty much all of us worked under the same roof. But now, over the past few years, we've gone from an organization that's based primarily in-house to one that's spread out across the continental United States. And that's been a rather exciting, if at times, I'll say exhilarating, sometimes intimidating challenge to go from just all instructor-led to having to do more online training. Because when I came to this organization, my background was primarily in instructor-led. So it was a pretty steep learning curve to get up to online training, but that's where I was able to go back to my notes from Skillagents, pour over them in detail, grab those kernels of wisdom, and to try to implement online training solutions as quickly as possible.
That's actually a huge challenge, right? It's just, especially, I can relate to that story. Just you come in and the background is face-to-face. You can read people. And then, so did you take existing face-to-face training and convert it into resources for remote workers?
In the beginning, yes. We were tasked with trying to get the training accessible as quickly as possible, because we were starting to onboard folks from remote locations, I think, within the next week. So it's like, oh my, okay, let's try to get the solutions out to them as quickly as possible. And I have to give so much credit to my colleagues, especially those who are practicing financial coaches and housing counselors, because we relied a lot on webinars to do shadowing, and that helped.
Cool.
To help us bridge that gap between not being able to shadow someone in person. And so we, to your question, we did start out with converting a lot of the instructor-led courses directly to online learning, pretty much pre-recording the lectures, which I remember was a key Skillagents lesson, was to make those lectures on demand to make them being able to be fast forward or rewound. So we started off with that. We continue to use it. And now a few years past that initial point of going to primarily online, we started to use more interactive features as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's kind of interesting. I think moving from a live interaction, it's almost like what can you do really quickly, but then it's almost like starting from scratch is sometimes almost better because you don't have the legacy stuff kind of that you're trying to fit new learning into. Yeah.
Precisely.
Okay, I got to dig into this because you said something very interesting. You said that your colleagues used webinars for job shadowing. Tell me more. This sounds interesting.
Oh, yes. We have web conferencing accounts, and we have a few in our organization. So I went out to a few folks who were really passionate about training, saying, hey, we've got this counselor who's based in the southern part of our state. They're trying to learn our systems. Could we set up a web conference for you to show them the ropes? So we set out like 1 or 2 hour blocks at a time. I would go over to their computer. This was back when we had all of our counselors in-house, and I would sit next to them. We would set up the web conferencing so that the counselor could share their screen. We would also use our internal telephone system so that we could link the learner right to the experienced counselor so they could hear them talking and also see their screen. And then we would conference in the client that the counselor was helping. And of course, we have all the monitoring and the necessary disclosures, of course, that we would do beforehand.
Yeah.
But we create a conference call between the three of them. The learner would watch the counselor work their magic and see the screen, and it turned out to be rather effective.
Wow, that's fantastic. So you were basically able to bring him in on live client interactions. Oh, that's wonderful. That's excellent. Cool. And you did that via just webinar. That's great. Wow.
Definitely.
I love that strategy. I think more people should be using that strategy. So if you're watching this, here's a nugget.
I heartily agree. Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So let's get back into before you started your Skillagents journey, what was your life like before you even just decided to be an instructional, basically designer, like a learner-centered instructional designer? What was that like?
Sure. I think before that, I was really passionate about training. I was facilitating new employee orientations and on-the-job training sessions, and really enjoyed it thoroughly and wanted to find a way to make it my career. I felt that I'd finally found my niche, so to speak.
Mm.
But I quickly realized that to do that, it would be best not only to learn how to deliver training, but also how to design it. And I wanted to get into that world, and going back to school wasn't an option for me at that point. So I wanted to learn on my own. And I found some great resources, articles and videos, but the one thing that kept coming up for me was the terms, the jargon that these articles and videos would be composed of. Terms like successive approximation and ADDIE and terminal objectives, and all of it sounded important and need to know it, but it was like disparate pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and I didn't know the big picture in which to put all those pieces together. So I just tried to plow through, try to look up terms that were unfamiliar to me as they came across. But it was around that time that I saw a video preview for Skillagents. And it blew me away because especially the term you used in that preview about learner-centered. And that spoke directly to my motivation as a trainer, as someone who wants to set their learners up for success, wanting that their success is my success, and helping them get to that mountaintop was like the ultimate feeling of accomplishment. And so I could hear that motivation in that preview. And I was also struck that it was going to be a course about, or rather not about any particular e-learning software, that it was going to be about the fundamentals you could use for any kind of software, or if you're constructing a course without software. So I thought this is exactly what I needed at this particular point, and signed up for it.
Cool. So when you said you were struggling with the terms, the frameworks, and because it was all new, like there's so much language that we take for granted. Let's call it technobabble. Terrible, terrible. So before that, what were some of the things that, like you said, you wanted to be learner-centered? What were some things that you struggled with as far as that came up as a challenge for you?
I wanted to find a way to break out of my primary lecture mindset. I think like before I just found training and development, I have like a speech communication background. That's what my major was at university. And I was thinking public speaking, some sort of career in that field. But I carried over that sort of content first mindset. And as a learner, I look back on my time as a student, and I think some of the learning experiences that I wish I could go back and reverse engineer were ones in which it was just like PowerPoint slide after PowerPoint slide after PowerPoint slide with just text and things. That's not what I want to do. I want something that's going to engage and learners right off the bat to help them get to where they need to be. So I wanted to find ways to unlearn some old habits of mine from the speech communication days and find ways that are really effective in the training and development field.
So it's kind of interesting you mentioned that, because I think that a lot of us, and maybe I don't know if you've encountered this when you work with subject matter experts, is they fall back to their learning, how they learned, and then they struggle to move out of that because that's how they learned. So everybody else should be okay learning that way as well.
Right. No, I completely agree. It's what we're familiar with, and it's tough to break away from what we're familiar to try something new, especially if you haven't had much experience as a learner going through it.
Yeah.
And you have to sometimes, and this is where I find it's helpful to enlist the help of colleagues that you trust the most to say, here, I'm trying something a little differently here. Let me know what you think. And that way you don't feel like you're going to fall flat on your face, so to speak. It's going to be like a safe failure if it doesn't turn out to be the case. So that's helped to try to really engage in those learner-centered techniques with building training.
So did you find that it was very helpful that way to have somebody who is already at least is able to effectively look at, like, sometimes learners can't tell you what they need, right? But you said you would have like colleagues look at work.
Oh, yes. Usually the experienced counselors at my current role and in past roles, folks who've been there a while working in the roles that the learners are being hired into.
Oh, very cool. That's great to have a support network like that.
Oh, very much so. I'm very,
Yeah.
very grateful.
Oh, cool. Well, I mean, I'm sure you're like a super addition to the team, but that's awesome.
No,
Takes a whole, it takes a village. All
very
right.
much
So okay. So you're struggling with the terms. You're trying to break out of this this lecture PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint kind of mindset. So how does that manifest itself in your work? Are you producing kind of work are you producing at this point?
Oh, I think it's a lot more active engagement. I blended two of the mastery patterns together: active learning and engagement. There we go. I'm trying to blend both of those into more solutions. I think right now I'm working on sort of retrofitting existing training where it was once primarily lecture based, to more bringing in those practice opportunities and weaving in the lectures as sort of help material. So the learner's given an activity, and then off on the corner they can click on a link to go back to like a lecture portion to learn more about it if they have any questions. So trying to incorporate existing, but also blend in more of what I know now to be best practices.
So it's cool because I think a lot of people try to basically throw the baby out with the bathwater. They're like, it's all wrong, right? But it sounds like what you're doing is you're saying, okay, it's content's content, right?
Right.
How can I make it practical or useful for somebody? And now you're, okay, this is really cool. I like that. All right. So what was it actually that made you what was a moment for you where you wanted to become learner-centered? Because there's tons of people who still lecture, Jeffrey, and they're just doing their job. They're doing what they're told. So what makes you want to, why did you do it?
Sure. I think to boil it right down to a single word, it would be empathy. Empathy with my learners. I think one reason I got into training was I remember how uncomfortable I feel on the first day of any new job, how like a fish out of water you feel, like you're going into a new environment, new colleagues, new routine, and it's so intimidating and so scary. And I feel that it could be the same with learning any particular skill. Granted, I tend to be a sensitive individual, so probably not everyone feels that, but I wanted to find a way to create a safe environment for folks who may be feeling intimidated, to reassure them that, hey, we're going to be learning something new. It may be challenging, but we're going to be here right with you every step of the way. And I found that with a lecture, I couldn't do that as effectively as I could by making it learner-centered, by building in active learning and collaboration and mastery learning and engagement, because that gives you a whole set of tools to really check on the learner's progress from start to finish, and not just at the finish. It's not like we're going to give a lecture and give a post-test and then that's it. It's, even though I can see that it may be helpful in some situations, I found that you really need to check for learning much more often, much more frequently. And being learner-centered helps you to do that really well.
So what kind of feedback did you get that made you go, oh, this isn't like what I wanted?
Oh, with the primarily the lecture courses first, or?
Yeah, well, like what gave you that feeling that you're like, I could do better or I could do more? What was it? Was there a moment?
I'm trying to think if there was a particular moment. It may have been just like a pot simmering on the stove that gradually it was boiling over to that point of recognition. I'm trying to think if there was like an aha moment. I think going through Skillagents, that definitely helped. I think that it really showed me what training could do to help learners feel comfortable and competent with what they wanted to do. And I think it was recalling back to my previous experiences as a learner. I remember there were training experiences in which we would go through a lot of content and then we'd have the post test. I think, getting my driver's license, it was a really scary situation, because you'd have lessons, but then you'd have the post test. And I felt, it'd be great to have like a mock post test somewhere in between there. So I think all those memories sort of coalesced around each other to make me realize that learner-centered was the way to go.
So it's almost like it sounds like you're the kind of person who's very empathetic, and it's almost like you wanted to create something to ease that anxiety for other people.
Precisely, yes.
Cool. Okay. So, okay. Now, how did you hear about my course? Were you a YouTube channel subscriber, or what happened?
Oh, I was going around YouTube searching for instructional design, and the video popped up.
Awesome. Okay. So, and you said that it was like, in my video, I said it was learner-centered, but how did you why did that resonate with you? Was it that it was just a novelty term, or what was it?
I think a combination of it being a novelty term. I hadn't heard it in the past articles and videos. I checked it out, so that really stood out. And I think the emphasis you placed on learners was something that really spoke to my motivations to want to get into training. It's about setting people up for success. It's about helping them achieve their own goals. And instead of being focused just on the content, or I think another phrase I heard was being the sage on the stage. That's something I try to keep in check. It's like, it's not about wanting to appear as the expert. It's about wanting to be, and here's another phrase, the guide on the side. I think those three phrases, learner-centered, sage on the stage, guide on the side, that they've helped keep me in check and on the same path. So I think I knew through that video preview that this was definitely a course that would incorporate the values that drove me into this field.
What surprised you about it? Was there anything in there when you started working through it that was like, oh, that's different? I didn't expect that.
I'd say how accessible you made the world of instructional design to be. It wasn't going to be like, here's the first step in the ADDIE model. Here's how you write a performance objective. You covered all the essential elements of instructional design, but in a way that can that welcomes in people like me who had no experience in instructional design, who had a desire to get into the field, but just didn't have those terms in mind. So I think the accessibility was a huge benefit and something that really stood out right away. I liked how the course started off with a rationale for why we were going to learn instructional design this way, about exploring why it's important to build in value for your learners, why we needed to incorporate a post-content mindset, how we could utilize the internet to its fullest potential, like pre-recording the lectures as opposed to delivering them live over and over again. And that set the stage for the Acme patterns. And it all made sense throughout the entire experience. And I think you also, I was really touched by this, that you always called back our motivation for wanting to get into this field. That you always found a way to incorporate, here's how it's going to benefit our learners. And that kept the fire going, that fire of motivation to progress through the course.
That's awesome. And I got to say, Jeffrey, you're an anomaly, because most people, they purchase things and they don't finish them and they don't apply them. So that's why I really wanted to talk to you today, because I think that people like you are special. And that's why probably it's excellent that people are developing learning as well, because it's obvious that it's in your blood. It's something you love. So that's cool.
Thank you, Anne. I really appreciate that.
Not a problem. I'm here all week, so. So, all right. So you are really well versed in obviously all the patterns and everything. It's fantastic. Now, was there any particular piece that was most useful to you that you're like, oh yeah, that there's this one skit that has the priest, and he does a skit where he tells you, I did 4 years in college, and I'm going to summarize it for you in a minute. And there's that one takeaway, right?
Right.
So is there anything that's like that for you from Skillagents that comes back and it's like, that's useful? That's the one thing.
Oh, I think this actually dovetails right with the example you just shared. And I think it was a question about, or how would you design a course for someone who's terminally ill? And that really spoke well to that takeaway of how do you boil everything down to the essentials? How do you build the course around? And that's come in handy time and time again, because one of the consistent, how should I put this? The consistent, I don't want to say barriers, but the things I run up against often, in no matter which role I'm in, is time. Like, we need to get our learners to be able to do this inside X days or X weeks. Usually it's days and not weeks. So it's been trying to boil down the courses to the bare essentials. That's been a huge lesson that I've come back to time and time again.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a good one. And it's funny. I now, because that one kind of, sometimes people get all weird about that one, right? Because it's terminally ill, right? But now I think it's a better analogy than my Pareto principle, which is like 20% of this will give you 80% of the results, right? So how can we just do that, and that paring down to the essentials? So that's cool. Oh, that's great. I'm getting some good feedback from you here. This is excellent. All right. So now, did other people support you in your journey? Like, as far as, these aren't like crazy concepts, but I found that there's still a pushback to saying, here's how we all learned. So who supported you on this journey, or are you a solo driver?
I think a little bit of a solo driver. I had lots of support from family and friends, which was incredibly valuable. And at the time I was going through Skillagents, I wasn't in a design role.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time I did get a design role, it was like perfect timing. I could take these lessons I learned and apply them right away. And I've been very grateful to have terrific managers, especially my current organization, and they were very supportive. And I think I'm still looking for opportunities to apply all the lessons of Skillagents in a particular project. And I'm afraid like time and resources, again, are the two things I come up against. But I try to always try to incorporate active learning and elements of mastery learning and collaboration too, and of course engagement. So I'm still on the prowl for that one golden opportunity where I could take all four and build it into that course there.
Although, I mean, really, you're stacking every time you add something, you're stacking the odds of success, right, for somebody. So I totally get that. And it's kind of cool because what sounds like, you're striving for perfection. You're like, it could be better. It could be better. And that's kind of our ethos, right? Like,
Right.
I could add more, but that's good. That's wonderful, right? It's never perfect.
Because I liken it to painting a bridge. Like once you're done painting it, you have to go back to the start and start over again.
Wait, you live near the bridge, right? Near the golden.
Yes, there you go. Yeah.
I heard. So you're in San Francisco?
Yes, ma'am.
So I heard that they have a custom paint color for the bridge.
Yes, it's called International Orange, and it's I don't know how they came up with that particular name, but it's this vibrant orange that they've been painting that bridge for now. I think it's been about 80 years.
That's very cool. That's fun. Yes. So your bridge analogy, it's funny how you brought that one up. It's one of the most famous bridges in the world. That's awesome.
Gosh, I guess we all work with what we know. So
that's right. That's awesome. But it's totally true. It is like by the time you finish it, you have to start over again and then maybe incorporate some lessons, right? So
definitely.
The change as far as I think you started implementing this, right? So you said there's always going to be time constraints. What are some other challenges for you, like when you're building out learning to incorporate these pieces that you want? What's something that commonly comes up that you're like, I wish I could solve this conundrum?
Sure. I think along with time, it's been access to subject matter experts. They're wonderful, wonderful colleagues. They're just busy all the time. So it's trying to find ways to meet them when they're available and prepare all the questions in advance. But then over the course of the conversation, a few more questions come up and then time's run out. So you have to find more time to meet up with them. So I think once you're able to get in the same room with them, either in person or virtually, then that's terrific. It's just getting to that point where everyone's available and you can get the content you need from them.
I think you're so absolutely right with that whole idea of subject matter experts, because usually experts are busy, right? Because that's why they're experts, because they're slammed, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's why you're meeting me on a Sunday. I love it. Thank you. So, the hardest things, like as far as just meeting with subject matter experts, do you have some tips for how to make somebody not dread having that conversation? Like, it's going to take so much time. Like, how do you prep for your subject matter expert interviews and meetings?
Yeah, I try to prepare the questions in advance and share the general topics with them over email or a quick phone conversation to let them know here's what I'd like to discuss. I also want to try to help them reminisce about what it was like for them to be a learner, to put them back in that chair of not knowing much, maybe feeling a little intimidated, to try to get a bit of an empathetic response from them to say, you're going to help us help the next generation of learners who are going to be coming into this role, and to make their path maybe easier than the one that you had to walk to get to the point where you're at now. And that seems to help out too, sort of giving them the questions in advance, try to help them see the benefit of going through the interview process. And also at the end, once everything's said and done, I always like to follow up with a thank you to let them know how much I appreciated their time and their efforts.
That's awesome. It's kind of interesting. You almost appeal to their generosity, right? You're going, you're doing good things here by sharing this information.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think this comes up once in a while with subject matter experts where they feel like they own their knowledge, right? And all of a sudden you're like, am I going to be, I don't know, made maybe a little bit less relevant because the stuff in my head has gone out there?
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think that that's definitely something that's come up in the past, not necessarily my current role, but in past ones. And in those situations, I try to not only appeal to their past experience as a learner, but also their commitment to the organization's mission. To say, we're all here to do X. We all want to help our customers, our clients achieve X. So the best way to get there is for all of us to be prepared to help achieve that mission. I usually use some other phrases to help them see that connection to the mission, but I think that is what helps them uh, not focus so much on risking their own value to the organization, but seeing how their value, in fact, increases by being willing to share their expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And to see that it's not something that they don't have to view it as like a weakness of sharing their knowledge. It's, in fact, a huge strength to be able to do that.
That's true. Wow. Good one. Love it. That's awesome. What were the hardest things about, on every project you're trying to stick to, okay, guys, let's make this engaging. Let's make this learner centered. What are some, do you get common objections? Like, what are some objections you get to ideas?
I think one meeting that stands out was one piece of feedback I got from that meeting was that we didn't cover all the content in detail, that it wasn't focused so much on explaining every single rule and every single exception to the rule. And to that, I tried to say, well, we're going to walk our learners through that, but they're actually going to experience those exceptions to the rules. We're going to give them scenarios in which they can practice applying these rules and making mistakes. And it's where the mistakes occur, is that's where the lesson's going to be at. So it's not going to be the sage on the stage trying to get all the wisdom out to everyone all at once. It's going to be more that guide on the side to say, all right, here's the basic rule. Now go try it out. And it's okay if you don't get it on the first try or the second try. That's what training is all about.
So that's a fantastic way you phrased it, is that you basically had somebody come up and basically have that, it's like age-old classic argument, right? We didn't include everything. We didn't include all the info up front. Right. But you reframed it in a way saying we are, but it's going to be a discovery almost for the learner when those rules apply. That's solid. Good. Did it work?
Yes. Yeah, very much so.
It was a good argument, but then they still poo-pooed it.
Right.
Okay, this was a success story. Okay, good one, Jeffrey. No.
Oh, it's all good.
Good. So, did anyone try to discourage you from continuing to implement, or did anybody? Sometimes people have best intentions, but they really actually make the process harder. Did you experience that?
I'm trying to think. Not as of yet. I know that it'll probably occur in later situations or later roles, but I think part of the experience I've had is I've usually been like a one-person training department. And, again, grateful to have great managers, but it's like I'm the only person in the organization who is tasked specifically with internal training. So that has its strengths and its weaknesses. And I think that's the reason why I haven't had a lot of pushback, is that since I'm the only person who is able to focus on these projects, then it's been easy to implement it.
So when you say, being a one-person department has its strengths and weaknesses, what would you consider some strengths and weaknesses of being in that role? I know I'm picking on you, but this is good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Be happy to share. I'd say a strength would be being able to try something out right off the bat, having an idea and running with it, as opposed to checking it out with your teammates, because when you do have teammates, it's good communication to be able to share an idea once you have it. So that's a strength. I think a weakness that comes to mind is that I haven't had the good fortune to work alongside an experienced instructional designer. I've had to sort of be my own mentor. And in the age of the internet, that's certainly possible to have courses like Skillagents, to be able to get books from the library. And And that's been terrific. I think ideally it would have been great to work alongside someone on a project, to be able to see their process and to be able to weave in the lessons I've learned in context. So I think that would be one weakness. I think another strength would be just being able to reach for the stars, to try anything and everything that comes to mind, and to not feel that you needed to find something that would be acceptable to the rest of the group. I think one of my weaknesses is I don't like conflict. I want to be sure to be as open and try to avoid any particular like disagreement as much as possible. So that's something I'm trying to work on, to, if there is a disagreement, to approach it tactfully and diplomatically and say, I think this idea is great, but perhaps this one would be worth a look to. So I think, sort of meandering a little bit with this answer, but I'd say strengths would be having some independence, weaknesses not necessarily having the other expertise of fellow instructional designers.
I get that. Yeah, somebody to bounce feedback off of. And it's kind of interesting you say that, because a lot of times, and I've been there too, and you're like the only person who actually understands learning, and then you'll ask for feedback, and the project manager is like, yeah, it's great, and you're like, you don't know what I do, you don't understand.
Exactly.
So exactly. All right, thanks for the feedback, buddy. It's great. It's like, I like it, I like that color. You're like, oh man, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, right. Like it's like if they showed you a Gantt chart, you'd be like, that's very cool. All right, right, not your thing.
Right.
All right. So, do you ever take shortcuts, or feel like, I could just? Did you ever had moments where you could you felt defeated or depressed? Like you just be like, hey, I could not have to invest all this time and effort into this.
I think there were times when I didn't have access to subject matter experts, and I had to rely on researching through our organization's repository of information about a particular skill that we needed our learners to learn. And I would face the jargon problems, like how do I make sense of something and teach something that I myself don't know? So those are times that I felt really, really downtrodden. And I could see in my initial ideas for that particular project that I started to lean more towards the content heavy side. And it's like, oh, no, this isn't going to work, but I don't know how else to get the information across. So I think in that particular situation, I started off with the content heavy, but then as subject matter experts became more available, I went back and retooled it to make it more active learning. So it was going a little bit down the wrong path, but then finding a way to steer back to the right one. Just getting to that point was a bit of a challenge.
I bet. Yeah, it's funny, subject matter experts do give you that context. So like you said, you could just take it and you could republish things very quickly, but
right.
That doesn't necessarily make it a learning resource, right? Just another resource.
Precisely.
That's a good situation. That's actually, I think a lot of people think, a lot of instructional designers think they can just get a manual and put together training from it.
Right. And that's something that I've had a lot of experience with, unfortunately, is want to take the materials and build the training right off there. And I learned the hard way that you can do it like creating job aids and things like that to some extent, but nothing beats talking with someone who actually lives this particular skill set, because that's where that secret ingredient of context comes into play. And it's crucial for any effective learning experience.
So did you just bookmark that kind of in your mind, saying, I'm going to come back to that when I have the resources so that I can make it better? How'd you overcome that?
Yeah, I think I ended up creating a prototype of something that I knew wasn't going to be the ideal solution, but I felt it would at least give me some peace of mind to say that, all right, if someone comes to me and says, where is this material, then I at least have something. And hopefully it wouldn't get to that point where we'd have to move it out to the learners, and fortunately it didn't. So I think I use that as a gigantic bookmark to say, all right, here's what we have, but this is something that definitely needs to be retrofitted to make it more active.
Which is better than nothing, right? You're putting it out there, and that's what prototypes are for. Just
right.
This is our first slap at it. Okay, cool.
Good.
So, was there a time or a moment where you said, I've figured this out, or you felt like you've had that success, that the satisfaction? Tell me.
I think it comes with each project. I think one project comes to mind. It was a customer service course. And in the beginning, the needs were, we need something so that our employees can have these successful interactions with our customers. And I felt, it's been done so many times all across the world, we could get something off the shelf, but I wanted to incorporate something that would be specifically tailored to our organization. So I ended up building the course around like 5 specific scenarios that come up for our organization. And the feedback we got from that course was gratifying to the extent that I felt, okay, I know that I'm on the right track. I've been able to implement these great lessons I've learned from Skillagents to say that, all right, this has been a success. And I think that feeling it sort of ebbs and flows like the tide. Like you want, and I think it's a good thing because it keeps me on edge. It doesn't leave me with a sense of complacency. It's like with any skill, you have to practice at it day in and day out. And because I know that with this speech communication background, that the lecture content mindset is never far from me. So I have to keep that in check, so to speak. So I think approaching each project with vim, vigor, and vitality, and it helps me keeps me on the right set to being learner-centered. So I think that feeling, it comes with each project, and when it does come, that's when I know that, okay, this was a success.
Very cool. Yeah, there are moments, right? It's not like you get immediate, for every single action that you get an actual reaction and you say, how did it go? Did you like it? Did it work for you? And then obviously results aren't felt until after. So yeah, it's kind of, you have to be, I think, okay with some delayed gratification with our projects, hey?
Exactly, very much so. And by the time it does come, you're actually onto another project. So it's like, oh, I get to come back and revisit this other one here and say, all right, this was indeed a success, and going back to the next one.
So what's your like life now that you're doing this? You're a one-person department. You're now training remote people. So what is like typical day in your life? Like what is that like? Are you just bombarded with project requests, or how does that work for you?
I think a typical day, I interact with a lot of our remote employees. I think they often have questions about a particular responsibility, and they know I've had some hand in training for that particular responsibility. So I've sort of become definitely not a subject matter expert, but someone who knows where to find the answers to their questions. So I sort of liken it to becoming a librarian, so to speak. So, and that's been gratifying to be able to help people find the answers to their questions. So that's a large part of the day. Another part is coordinating those external courses for our employees. We usually have someone going through some kind of training all the time. And then, of course, one of my favorite parts of the day is being able to work on projects that we're working on in-house. And we recently got Adobe Captivate for the first time at our organization. And I'm like a kid in a candy store with that program. So that's been a lot of fun because I've gotten to retrofit some of our older courses to make them more interactive using those best practices from Skillagents.
So this is a neat aspect that you have at in your job, is that you're actually able to talk to the front end users of your training.
Oh, yeah, very much so. Yeah.
That is totally rare. I know this, most people I never get to, like complete removal, right? So this is awesome. So what kind of, do you get intel? Do you get insights from them? Like, tell me, how does that affect your work? Do you think it does?
Oh, very much so. It's so valuable to get feedback directly from those front end users, because, and especially like right after they complete a course, they can say, just call me up, send me an email, and I make it known to everyone, please let me know what you found good with this course and not so good with this course, because anything I can do to fine tune it is what I want to do. So I'm very, very grateful for that opportunity.
That's great that you're able to reinforce that within your organization. That to me is like a true learning organization. That there's a communication between the person who produces it and the person who consumes it. That's fantastic.
Oh,
Nice.
thank you.
Good place. All right.
Definitely very grateful.
Okay. So now returning back to what we just when we started talking, what kind of what would you suggest to anybody else who's trying to get into this, or basically trying to overcome this like they're stuck in a place, they want to produce good work, they want to, maybe they are empathetic like you, which is wonderful, because I think it's kind of an essential, I think, working in learning design. But you're giving advice to, let's say, the person you were, I don't know, 10 years ago. What would you say?
Say, don't get discouraged. Keep at it.
Fabulous.
Remember why you want to get into this field. And to your point, Anna, having that empathy is such a huge component. It's wanting to see your learners succeed. And when you have that as your driving force, you can surmount any jargon. You just have to, from time to time, tap back into that motivation to say, I'm in here because I want to help my learners, and these terms, they don't make sense now, but they will. In this age of the internet, we can look up any answer to any question. So it's a matter of having the persistence, the dedication, the patience to work through those barriers to get to where you need to be to build up that skill set to help your learners. So definitely don't get discouraged. Remember why you want to get into this field, because it will be as rewarding as you hope it will be. There's nothing like the feedback you get from a learner who says, this course helped me do my job better. That's like over the moon. That's what I strive for each and every day, is to help learners be able to do what they do better, easier, fill in the blank, that adjective there. So it's a hugely rewarding field, and I strongly recommend it for anyone who really values setting others up for success.
So one of the things you mentioned is persistence and work. And so do you, I think this is one of those things that people were kind of used to, instant things, like take a workshop for 2 days, right? And then have you found that it's the application piece that makes that work for you? Like the crafting, like how long do you think you were crafting before you were like, I feel better about this?
It's months. And
Right.
I share that not to discourage anyone. I just
Yeah.
to
All
be
good things. All good things. Take time, right?
Definitely, yeah. Yes. Like any skill that's worth doing is worth doing over a long period of time, and being willing to trip every once in a while. It's learning from our mistakes, as we are encouraging our learners to do with that. And that can be discouraging, is the long wait time. So I think having a strong enough motivation to get through those months is key, and to know that there's joy in the journey. Learning about all the different nuances of instructional design will make you that better of an instructional designer. And then the application piece, of course, is so crucial, because we can learn about things in the abstract, but not until we are actually able to build something from the ground up using what we've learned is, where our education's a little incomplete. So to be able to take what we've learned and apply that's huge. And although it can take some time to get there, it's definitely well worth it.
So, Jeffrey, what would you say to somebody who's, looking at getting into an instructional design job? They see all these bullets. They see, they'll see Captivate, they'll see facilitation, they'll probably see Photoshop and all this kind of stuff. And let's say they're missing some of this stuff. So what advice do you have to those people?
I'd say just go for it.
I love it. Now give me more details. What do you mean by that?
Of course. I'd say, be truthful with yourself about your skill set. You may not know Captivate, but you may have encountered some, or you may know Storyline, or you may be able to take PowerPoint to its fullest potential with all the interactivity there. I think as long as you know the fundamentals behind what makes an effective course, people can learn skills, but they're hired for attitude. So I'd say be mindful of what makes an effective learning environment, a learning experience. And even if the listing contains programs that you're not quite familiar with, still go for it, and even check out the tutorials online. That's what I did. I tried to get a little preview of what Captivate and Storyline were about, and that helped immensely to be able to have some orientation around those programs. So I'd say, keep on going for it. Learn as much as you can, with the resources you have, the internet, of course, being wonderful, the library too. And, don't be scared off by the particular software requirements, because anyone can learn the software, but it's the attitude and the skills behind that takes time.
I like how you said that people are hired for attitude, because if you believe you can learn it, it's, in a year, everything could be different. We could have it's not like everybody's going to get fired because there's new software, right? We're just going to say, hey, you've got a new skill to learn, go for it. Right. And
exactly.
Yeah.
Very, very well said. Exactly. It seems like there's a shiny new toy that comes along every few years or so, and we have to learn that one, but it's how we use that shiny new toy. That's what counts.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. That's wonderful. Okay, so let's say somebody wants to get in touch or learn more about the work that you do, or work with you, become the other instructional designer that works alongside you. Just kidding. I think you like being a one-man department.
Oh, no, I am open for collaboration. So I
Fabulous. Definitely. So where should people go to connect and learn more about you?
Oh, I think best place would be my LinkedIn profile, linkedin.com/in/JD Moffett. Again, to be completely candid, I am still building up a portfolio of courses, so I don't have that available yet. So, but again, to appeal to the folks who are watching, I'm still very much progressing as an instructional designer. So I think LinkedIn profile, please feel free to connect with me there.
That's fabulous. And I think that's why I want to talk to you, is because you still remember your journey, your struggles. And a lot of people who are 20 years in, they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about, right? I got this down in my sleep, right? So that's fabulous. So thank you so much for meeting me today. And everybody, I will put the link to Jeffrey's profile underneath the video, so you can peruse it and get in touch. All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone.
Have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.